Well, my next guest was Irish comedy royalty until he spoke out against transgender ideology, and then his name was Mud over the last 6 years or so. Grant Linehan is the writer producer of big hits such as Father Ted, the It Crowd or the IT Crowd, which we argue about all the time in my house, how to say it. He says that both are right, so he won't let me be right on this one. Well, he spoke out against men and women's spaces, and then after that, he couldn't get big name actors whose careers he made to call him back. He couldn't get work. He was the modern day Job. He lost everything. We see him now speaking out against this on X. He gets a victory lap as it becomes acceptable to say that transgender ideology was oppressive to women. And he joins us today. His book is called Tough Crowd. It is a really delightful read. Grant Linehan, it's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for coming on Redacted.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me.
So I want to let you know that I really loved your book. The IT Crowd is a cult classic in my house. It got me through a time when I was really sick with my first pregnancy. So tell us about how you had such a really great career and how the rug was pulled out from you for what we would call wrong think.
Yeah, well, I think I would have a good argument that I was probably one of the biggest sitcom comedy writers in the UK. Just before I got cancelled, one of the final things that happened to me before that was I got a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Comedy Awards and a standing ovation. So things couldn't really have been better. But I started noticing that women were getting abuse online for saying basic truths, for standing up for rights that we'd assumed women had won 100 years ago, and we're suddenly now in contention again. So I started talking about it, thinking that everybody would see the bullying, everyone would see the harm to children, everyone would see the destruction of women's rights and help. And instead, I just kind of found myself alone. And to this day, only I would say, I could count on possibly one hand the amount of people who've supported me. So with that lack of support, trans activists were able to, uh, destroy my reputation and career in various ways. Twitter, before Elon Musk arrived, banned me for saying men aren't women. That ban was used to prove that I was harassing people online, which I never was. Um, and basically, and also even the I went on BBC's flagship news program, Newsnight, to talk about the scandal of transitioning children, and they gave me 5 minutes and turned it into an ambush, and I couldn't get anyone to take it seriously. I couldn't get anyone to take the fact that children are being irreparably hurt in UK clinics seriously. Luckily now that seems to be coming to an end. Uh, there's there's some very good things that have happened, like puberty blockers. Their routine use has been banned, but unfortunately, they're still talking about putting some kids on them to test them, which is like something you would hear out of the era of Nazi experiments. I find it
Right.
a shocking thing that we're even having the discussion. Of course, you shouldn't give children puberty blockers. But
Right,
anyway,
but one of the ways that they targeted you was through extreme cooties. We call it politic by cooties. So when, for instance, one of your actors, the Richard Iotti, is that how you say his last name?
I
When
guess.
he put a forward in your book, they called him transphobic for allowing his name to continue to be associated with you. So it was a lot like the Daniel Radcliffe, J.K. Rowling, like you must speak out against this or else. Chris O'Dowd for being your friend. And so they continue to try to drag down names that are associated with you unless these people denounce you. That has to be hurtful. Can you explain how that's continuing to happen?
Yeah, well, the problem for me is not so much like the people who stuck up for me did so under a lot of pressure. Journalists would constantly ask them about me, and it just revealed to me how easily some people fall to that kind of pressure. It makes you realize how things like the Stasi happened, and other kind of maybe McCarthyism is another example, the more extreme end of it. And it made me realize how easily people fall into these patterns. There was a guy I worked with. His name was Bill Bailey. It could be argued I helped make him famous because he appeared in a sitcom I wrote called Black Books, which was very popular. And he said he was baffled by my activism. And it's like, I sometimes you really do feel like you're going mad. It's like, how can you be baffled by me standing up for my daughter's rights? How can you be baffled for me not wanting grown men who put on a pink hairband to be allowed into a woman's changing room? I just don't. I am baffled at their bafflement,
Yeah.
And most of all, I think behind everything is what they've been doing to children. Like there's thousands of young girls now who have double mastectomies because of this cult, I call it. And I just don't understand why people like Bill and people like my old writing partner Arthur Matthews and others, I don't understand why they don't care about these kids, and
I think
also
you make the
me.
point in your book that they don't understand why you care because you're a man, you continue to have your issues. And so you address this in the book. Why are you willing to lose things? Why are you willing to lose such a prosperous and high profile career for this?
Well, it's tied to a few things. Like one of them is I'm a writer, and as a writer, I love the English language. It's like a incredible toolbox full of everything I need. So the idea of taking a word like woman and changing its meaning so fundamentally, a fundamental word being changed fundamentally, is so dangerous. It's not happening in an organic way, the way language usually changes. And the reason it's not happening in an organic way is the words woman and the word mother and all these fundamental words, they link us back to the entire history of human development. And to remove them and say they now mean their opposite, it's almost like psychological warfare on us. And it certainly isn't something that I think, and I think I'm not saying it's entirely linked to this. I think a lot of woke ideas have caused this situation. But you'll notice there's not as many good movies at the moment. I know everybody old says that, there's a kind of the Hollywood writers are trying to write a world they think should exist rather than the one that exists. And so as a result, you get these. I compare it to the Hays Code, the very restrictive censorship code that Hollywood had in I think it was the 40s and 50s. The Hays Code made sure that a whole period of American life wasn't really represented accurately. It was very softened and it was very child friendly, let's say, even things for adults. And that was all blown apart when the film Bonnie and Clyde came about. And I feel like we need a similar thing to happen here. I think we need something to explode all these old assumptions that are not shared by the vast majority of people. They're only shared by elites, Hollywood producers or executives, journalists, everyone in, the media classes. They're the only people pushing these beliefs. Ordinary people don't buy them for a second. And it's why that when they become clear that what's happening, when people realize it's actually true that Leah Thomas was going into a woman's changing room, and when people see that this is actually true, they all reject it. But unfortunately, in the UK, there's a whole media system built around like for instance, the BBC is heavily captured. The BBC is basically a propaganda channel for drag acts and Palestine, and it's like they will not report on this issue unless it puts them in a good light. So there's no reports, for instance, on men in women's prisons. There's no reports on. Recently, this woman is trying to open a female only gym, and she's getting dogs abuse online because of it. They never report on any of that, and as a result, all the things that I would go to like I would go to Let Women Speak protests with Posey Parker and so on, and they would just be violently attacked, and no one knows about it. No one knows about it.
Yes.
So it's
But that's a tactic, though, because in Helen Joyce's book Trans, she talks about how activists said, keep this under the radar, because if people understand what it means, men and women's spaces, these were trans activist legal groups, specifically in Ireland. So it's you two Irish people, blowing the lid off of what Irish activist groups did not want to do, because Ireland was a test bed for self-ID, for gender ideology. So specifically, they needed you guys to be quiet, and both of you decided not to be.
Yeah, well, I think they call that forced teaming, and it's something that trans activists like to do, in the same way that they have taken over the gay civil rights movement and turned it into a kind of parody of itself, where they're literally trying to get straight men and women into gay spaces. They've done that, but also I remember. I'm not sure how conservative this show is, but my ex-wife and I, we had a first pregnancy that was complicated, and the child would have been born and only lived a few minutes. So we elected to have an abortion, and we campaigned for abortion rights in Ireland. And I remember being at one campaign. Now, consider that Irish women have been waiting for years just to have this conversation. And we're at this demonstration, and we hear someone saying, "We want abortions paid for by the state," or something like that. And we all cheered. And then it said, and operations for trans people. And I thought, where did that come from? This was about,
what's that got to do?
Yeah, it's 10 years ago. And I realized only later that the trans movement had completely captured the fight against abortion in Ireland. So the win that Irish women had in that has been tainted, because it was used the same way trans activists use everything to further their own cause.
Right. And so in the United States, we have this movement towards free speech, to be able to say that men are men if our innate instinct, which is bred into us to show who we can and cannot mate with, it's necessary for the propagation of the human species to be able to recognize the opposite sex. So if our instinct points out that that's a man, we are allowed to say that now in the United States because of the Trump election. That's at least what we're moving towards. Whereas in the United Kingdom and abroad, and in Ireland even still, that freedom of speech does not seem to be catching on, despite growing calls for it. So is this going to bleed across the pond, or isn't it? What do you think?
Is it what? Sorry, what was the question?
Is it going to bleed across the pond? Are you going to make it so that you can say this? Because people still get arrested for wrongthink in the United Kingdom, in Ireland, in Greenland, in Germany.
In Europe in general, yeah. Like, there's a terrible problem with free speech in the UK. The free speech, certainly for me, free speech doesn't exist in the UK.
I'm sorry, I meant Iceland, but go ahead. I wanted to correct myself.
Yeah, free speech is in a terrible state in the UK. One of the problems is that there was an organization called Stonewall, which named after the Stonewall riots, which is a bit like GLAAD, is it, in the US?
Yeah, they call it GLAAD. Yeah,
GLAAD. And they, Stonewall, have given the wrong advice to all these businesses, and not just businesses, to the police, to the NHS. They've given this advice that isn't right. They've told, you shouldn't say women, you should say birthing mothers, you shouldn't say this, you shouldn't say that. And it's being swallowed by a very, very bureaucratic nation that has no one to turn to say, this doesn't seem right,
Yeah.
And so what we have is that, like, Keir Starmer came into power saying he would He would sort out the culture war. He would end the culture war. But he's done no such thing, because he's not made any definitive statements like, of course, women need single-sex spaces. Of course, children shouldn't be experimented on. Of course, lesbians don't have penises. He's too much of a coward to say any of these statements. So as a result, the culture war is being fought every day by ordinary people in all these different areas. Like, for instance, the other day, some women handed out a leaflet just expressing basic biological beliefs, and a man tried to get them to move, to leave. He thought he was following the law. They knew they were following the law, and it's just a mess, because we have a lot of people, and I would include the celebrity class, the people who are supposed to be communicating to the public. We have a lot of people who simply are too frightened to tell the truth, because their privileged kids will get angry at them,
Yeah.
because the only people who support this stuff are people, very, very privileged people.
Right. And so tell me what you think this means for comedy, the ability to continue to write comedy, which is necessary in any free society, in any society, I'm going to say, and how this allows for something that society clearly needs when our language is policed.
Yeah, well, I think comedy acts as a kind of a pressure release. When we can't talk about things, it really helps to see it represented in some way on a screen. And of course, it's a very healthy thing. And I know you and I would both remember that time when that didn't happen all the time, but every so often you'd see a really good comedy, and that's just died. And I think the reason it's died is because for comedy to work, there has to be a background of normalcy. You have to say, okay, this is what life is supposed to be like. So the comedy acts as a kind of a contrast to that. So if you're saying that, oh, actually, there's no such thing as normalcy, men can be women, women can be men, gay people can be straight, then you're no longer able to make comedy, because there's no reality to subvert. So again, the fight against this for me has been existential, because you can't be a feminist or a feminist ally if you can't be a comedy writer, you can't support your friends. No, you can do none of this stuff in a world where there's a group of very violent activists and very captured politicians carrying out these ridiculous commands.
Yeah. For me, I'm just going to share this because we're talking. I was a very liberal person too. And the trans ideology is what broke my subscription to the Democratic Party. As soon as I realized they're hurting children and they're lying to us about it, they're couching this under gay rights when it's actually homophobic. Yeah. And they have a strict adherence to the biopharmaceutical industry, and they're creating lifelong pharmaceutical patients. What else is the Democratic Party lying to me about? And it was a house of cards. And that led me to, I'll just continue to share because we have time, that Obama droned children in the Middle East. And I thought he was so cool for being Black. That Black Lives Matter is ignoring the real violence on Black people. That there is mass immigration that's trying to usurp an organized society in order to, I just, all of it came crashing down on me. And the career I thought I had as a liberal journalist, someone who was really going to show him, was not based on research. And it has completely changed my identity as a liberal person. And I lost friends, people who I thought, oh, well, if you see this data, I could just keep going on, the green agenda, all of that. But what I have is completely different. It looks different, and I believe in it. And I'm committed to, if I see something that changes my paradigm, to looking at it, even if it's uncomfortable. And so in that way, you and I sort of have a story like that. You lost what you thought you would have, but what you have now looks very different, and it's pretty great too. I mean, at least I think your book is great. I love your work online. So is that something that you can relate to?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, it's a terrible thing when you realize that you yourself were a kind of disinformation node at a time when you were
Yeah.
sharing stuff that you just kind of, you presumed it was true because you liked all your friends and they were the ones telling you it was true, and their political beliefs, you shared them and so on. I've been through the exact same process as you, and yeah, but I think that it would be nice to have an ordered life, and I think a reason why why people don't want to get into this debate at all is because they know the same thing will happen to them, that their lives will be changed forever. But for me, the thing is, I could not live with myself if I thought I wasn't doing anything about these kids being hurt. As you say, these kids are being irreparably harmed, and it's not just the pharmaceutical industry, the plastic surgery industry. To see the left clapping like seals in support of a movement that enriches plastic surgeons and big pharma, that's not liberal, that's not progressive. They're just lying.
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
not good enough. They have to be held
Well,
to a
also,
high.
you can't have it both ways. You can't sell me a Dove ad with people who are overweight and have skin problems and say you're beautiful how you are, unless you're trans, in which case change everything in order
Exactly.
to accept yourself. It's
Yes.
very duplicitous. And I don't think I had seen that when I was applauding, the Caitlyn Jenner
Yes.
E. I just thought, well, that's great. They want to do that. Whatever. I did not see what this would do to young people.
Yeah.
How much of this of the opposition that you get happens in real life? There's a story in your book that I literally was laughing until I was crying about the man who kicks down the bathroom stall. Because can you
Oh
tell
yeah.
that story? Okay, because literally I couldn't see. My eyes were totally closed from laughing with tears.
Well, I was just trying. I put that story in because I wanted to point out that throughout my whole life, I've been fiercely defensive of artists on stage, people who are, taking a great risk. I feel like audiences. I've always felt this. Audiences should be quiet, and they should listen attentively. And if they don't enjoy it, they shouldn't clap. That's the job of the audience. But
Right.
but like there was a guy in front of me who was shouting back at everything these comedians said, and it was a scripted comedy. They weren't, after a while it was just impossible for them to deal with it. So so I just shouted at him to shut the f up, and
In
I
a
didn't
comedy club.
up to it. I went straight. I started there, and he followed me into the loo and kicked the door down. Just ended up staring at each other because neither of us wanted to fight. So,
He sure told you. And the way you tell this story is like he kicked in the bathroom stall. You
yeah,
stared each other down, and that was that. But you did have to wonder, are we going to go to fisticuffs
yeah,
over
yeah.
just me telling you to shut up in a comedy club?
Well,
I
yeah.
really want. Okay, he tells this story brilliantly in the book and many others just like that. So once again, please do seek out the book. Now, I started this conversation by saying you're a lot like Job in the Bible because you stood to your beliefs and it cost you everything. But Job gets a life back and it's a new life. It's a different, it looks different. So can you tell us what has come about in the fact that most people now agree that you were right all along?
Well, I mean, as I say, even with the vindication of various things that have happened, including the cast report in the UK, I don't think I'll ever work in the UK again. And to be honest with you, I don't really want to because I have nothing but contempt for the people in the UK, my colleagues in the UK who didn't lift a, you know, who didn't say a
I
word.
feel like that about the mainstream media. I feel like
Yeah,
that too. Like I could
yeah.
never go back. Yeah.
Exactly. So, I'm going to. I mean, one great thing is, which alludes to what you were saying earlier, is that I have discovered that journalism was the thing I did when I got into writing, and it was just music. It was music journalism, and then I went into comedy, and now I'm back in journalism again, but more serious form, writing about these issues. And what's been wonderful is finding that out about myself, that I can kind of keep making money through my writing, even though it's far less than I used to get as a sitcom writer. But it's great to know that if when it comes to it, I can actually um, keep going. And I mean, I'm hoping now we have an idea that we're hoping to get going in the US, a sitcom idea, and we're just gonna try and plug that and see what happens, because I personally think there's a great hunger for stories that haven't been told for the last 10 years. And I think that when we come out of this mess we're in, the stories like what happened to you and what happened to me will be interesting to people, I mean, I think
Yeah.
there's various. Cancellation is what I call a sort of boutique experience. They give you the cancellation that suits you. So that when for J.K. Rowling, they take her name off school buildings, which must have deeply hurt her. But for me, they just called the police on me, and they cancelled my musical. But then there's ordinary people, many of whom I know. Like I know a teacher of autistic children who was targeted by trans activists, and he can't teach autistic children anymore. There's so many stories out there and a few big ones are breaking through in the UK now. For instance, the nurse Sandy Peggy, who was being asked to undress in front of a man in her changing rooms at work, and I think those stories will need to be told, because for me, there's a big gap where we all started lying to each other, and once we start being able to tell the truth again, I just think you're going to hear some incredible stories.
Yeah. My story is not so much funny, but, I think I don't care that much for being guilty of wrong thing, except when people blame my children for it. There was a boy who told my son, your parents are guilty of misinformation. So I put a jinx on that kid, and that's how I handled that. So don't mess with my children. That's the part that I think bothers me the most. Not so much what comes from me.
They couldn't get me to change my opinion, so they went after my wife, and we broke up under the strain because I wasn't making any money and she was getting abuse, and that's what they do. If they can't get you, they come after your family. I genuinely think that trans activism is a form of domestic terrorism. And like in the UK, there's only about, I would say, 10 to 10 guys who are causing all the toxicity and all the viciousness and all the kind of worst. These are nothing to do with trans people. These are just con men, predators, and they've all found a way to connect on the internet.
Yeah.
And if the police took them seriously instead of the women who they're trying to attack, then England might be livable. But at the moment, it isn't.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing your story with me. You can follow at Glinner on X, or again, one more time, the book, Tough Crowd, How I Made and Lost a Career in Comedy. So I wish you the best. I have been a fan of yours since I picked up the book last year. And it was a real pleasure to speak with you. Come back on Redacted anytime.
Oh, thank you so much. It was lovely to speak to you too.